I used to think that drawing for 2 hours every day would improve my skills to a professional level. But nearly 10 years later, not only is that not true, it's actually self-destructive. If you've been struggling to interpret the art advice that's out there and you don't feel that you're improving, then this video is for you. Now, there's a lot of advice out there. I tried to give it myself, and I'm in no way throwing shade at others or saying that my advice is better than theirs. But in this video, I'm going to show you a realistic way of applying the advice to your circumstances. And we're also going to discover how to interpret all art advice, including what I say in this video and every other video that I make. So a lot of us, myself very much included, focus so much on how much time we should be spending each day on studying. And it makes sense on the surface to do that, but it's completely meaningless if you don't have structure or intention behind your studies. Structure is what you need to learn, and intention is how you apply what you learn. Now, one of the hardest questions to answer in art is, what do I need to learn in order to get better? And the trouble is that most of us just don't have a structure, and so we rely on often random YouTube videos to guide us. And as great as YouTube videos are, especially mine, they're not always relevant to what you need right now. Also, let's be honest, studying all the time becomes a bit boring after a while. You start to stagnate and resent the idea of drawing another box or another perspective grid. But what isn't boring is your comic. And you're going to use your comic as your structure. Now, I'm going to plant a little red flag here, because if you do this wrong, then you may end up resenting your comic, and we don't want that. I'll show you how to avoid that later, don't worry. For now though, let's look at how we can use our comic to see what we need to focus on the most. And let's start by looking at this page here. It'll be really easy for me to look at this and think, well, I need to focus on everything because I suck. And that thought is definitely in there, but it's not really helpful for us. So let's get more specific. I think this panel here is quite revealing. We've got a challenging angle here, and I think the pose, particularly of this character, is a little bit weird. Especially her ponytail, I think that looks a bit strange to me. So I can look at that panel and take note of the fact that I'm clearly not quite comfortable at drawing characters from that particular angle. So that suggests that it would really help me to practice some perspective from that angle, which is exactly what I did. Now, I know that I mentioned time and that we shouldn't really focus on time, but we do have to consider time because we have to spend at least some time studying and working on our comic at the same time. So how do we fit the time in? When I first heard about this idea that you should study for 2 hours every single day, I would force that into my calendar thinking that I was on the right path. But the problem is that the vast majority of us just can't do that because it's unsustainable. And as soon as we miss a day for whatever reason, then we're left with stress, guilt, and burnout. Now, you might be thinking that you can handle 2 hours a day, and maybe you can, but take it from someone who's been on the other side of thinking that they can handle 2 hours every single day. There's something you're not considering. Scheduling out your day for intense study periods over a long period of time doesn't just impact you. I would say no to spending time with friends, and I would say no to spending time with my wife because I had to prioritize improvement, or at least I felt that way. This impacted my relationships and I started to feel distant. And whenever I would say yes to an event, then I wouldn't really be present because I'd be thinking that I was falling behind in my progress because I wasn't studying. And that way of thinking was built on this false idea that 2 hours per day was the correct amount of time in order to improve at the rate that I wanted to improve. But there is no correct number. What matters most is consistency, not rigidity. We're in this game for life, so we need to find ways to make this sustainable for our lives over the long term. So instead of thinking about your art improvement as this structured 2 hours per day, every single day session, think about it more like this. So let's go back to this page here. So I've identified this last panel and I've noticed that the perspective feels a little bit strange. So the next time that I sit down to work on my comic, I'm going to spend 10 minutes doing some perspective studies. I don't need to render the drawings or anything like that. I just need to make sure that the shapes align with the particular perspective. So as an example, if I'm drawing a cylinder-like object, like a torso, then I need to make sure that the cross contour lines wrap around like this because we're looking up at it. If we're looking down at an object, then the lines would wrap around this because we're looking down. So simple things like that. If you can nail that, then you can build a body out of it. And that's what I practiced for 10 minutes. And then as soon as I've done that practice, I'm going straight into working on my comic. So it serves as practice and warm up at the same time. So it's really, really efficient. And this is intentional studying because I'm focusing on one thing for one specific reason. And I'm not being distracted by all the other things that I need to learn. And I'm not being overwhelmed by feeling that I have to learn all of them all at the same time. Because I don't. This system of working has enabled me to maintain momentum and it's helped me eliminate that feeling of the inconsistent motivation that so many of us go through. And you can see how I create my pages over my Patreon at patreon.com/BrinkleyComics. You can see the thumbnails, pencils, and inks of all of my pages for my comic Flowers and Shadows, as well as get early access to these videos. You can also get access to my content vault, which has all of the PDF guides that I've made, Notion templates, and workshop replays. It's probably the best way to support the channel right now, so if any of my videos have helped you, then please consider checking it out. Now, let's pick up that red flag that I planted earlier. When working like this, we are exposed to the risk of the comic panel loop, and this is what it looks like. So first, we observe our panels. Next, we notice the flaws. Next, we study, and then we redraw and observe again. And what happens is a lot of people get locked in on the same page or even the same panel because they do an entire redraw and they notice, oh, this is wrong, I could do better. They study, they redraw, they study, they redraw, and you never actually move on. For me, and this is a real world example, I noticed that the panel wasn't 100% perfect, certainly the perspective. So I studied, but I didn't redraw. Instead of redrawing, I moved on to the next page, which is this one here. And I basically repeated the same system. So I went through the page, I drew the page, and then I observed. So if I take this first panel here, again, the perspective is okay, but is it perfect? Probably not. If I redrew it, could I make it tighter? Probably, yes. But 9 times out of 10, it's not going to make a difference. It's not really going to improve it that much. Unless something is like completely broken, like you've accidentally broken one of your character's arms, then yeah, redraw the arm, fine. But if it's just something that could do with a little bit of tweaking, but it's going to translate to an extra hour or 2 hours or 3 hours of drawing, I don't think that's worth it. So instead, you need to adopt the mindset of being mindful of where your weaknesses are, doing little study sessions before each comic session, and move on to the next page and take that learning into the next page, not the current one, which is exactly what I did with this page as well. And we can start to see an improvement. So I feel that for this page, I think for this page, for this panel in particular, the perspective is really good. I'm really happy with it. And so happy with it, I did it twice and I'm happy with both of them. Notice that none of what I mentioned has anything to do with the amount of time that you spend on studying or even on your comic. Like that's not the metric that we're tracking here. And it's not even the metric that we care about that much. Now, I use 10 minutes as my example because I think that 10 minutes is probably the minimal amount of time that you want to spend on studying something. But if you can stretch that to 30 minutes or even 45 minutes, then obviously that's even better. But don't worry too much. Don't focus too much on the amount of time that you spend on studying. If you've only got 10 minutes, that's fine. If you've got 45 minutes, that's fine too. The important thing to focus on is the structure and the intention, not the time. Now, this process may feel a bit odd at first, and you probably won't be able to specifically point out exactly what it is that you need to learn, especially if you're still relatively new to this, and that's fine. 1, you're going to get better at doing that, and 2, show your page to somebody else, someone who's a bit more advanced than you, and ask them to point out 1 or 2 weak areas that you could focus on. Ask them to be as specific as possible. The more specific they are, the better that helps you. But that being said, before you do show it to anyone, try and use your feelings as your guide. Whatever panel you look at and think, that doesn't look quite right, or that didn't turn out quite as well as I'd hoped it would, then use those feelings to guide you on what you should learn next. For example, if you don't like the way that you drew a character, then you probably need to study figure drawing or anatomy. If the angles of your panel are a bit wonky or a bit strange, then you probably need to study perspective. And you can get really, really specific in this. So let's say that you drew a car and it came out a bit weird, then study cars for a bit. If you feel this, then study this. If you feel this, then study this. If you feel this, then study this. All three of these are the absolute best thing for you to study because they're relevant to you. That's kind of the key here. So whenever you're stuck thinking, oh, I don't know what to learn first, or I don't know what order to learn things in, that's the order that you learn it in. You use your comic to figure out where your gaps are, and that's how you define the structure that is most relevant and helpful to you. Hopefully this is starting to make sense. Now, let's talk about advice, including everything that I've just said and how we can apply it to our situation. So a lot of the times when we're looking to improve, we're looking for guidance. We're looking for people who have walked a particular path and we're hoping to follow them on that path. And that makes sense. That's a good thing. I know that Stan and Marshall have often referred to these as your art parents. These are the people that you look up to, and I think that's great. I have art parents. I think everyone has art parents. These are the people who inspire you. But we have to be careful when those art parents are giving us advice that we don't take that advice literally. Because the truth is, studying for 2 hours every single day absolutely worked for the artists who advised me the same thing. They are an incredible artist and they're someone who I admire and respect a lot. And they put their success and their current abilities partly down to this sort of schedule, this 2 hours every day. But the thing is, that couldn't have worked for me because I'm not them and you're not me. I used to tie myself in knots trying to bend my life to the art advice that I was receiving, but I should have done the opposite. When you hear advice, including everything that I'm saying in this video and every video that I ever make, bend the advice so that it fits into your life, not the other way around. You have your own schedule, your own responsibilities, your own energy levels. So make sure that the art advice that you apply fits into those things. And also, you don't have to take 100% of what people tell you. You can take 30% from person A, 50% from person B, and 20% from person C, and you can create an entirely new way of studying and improving that works for you. I used to think that what the fuck is that? I used to think that, okay, I need to get rid of that, sorry. I used to think that I was lazy and uncommitted to the cause because I couldn't commit the same amount of hours as the artists who I admired and looked up to. But I was neither of those things. I was working long hours, I had a daughter with learning difficulties, and I was trying to make ends meet at the same time as trying to learn one of the hardest things that you can. And I don't know why I'm talking in the past tense because I still work long hours, I still have a daughter with learning difficulties, and I'm still trying to make ends meet while learning one of the hardest things you can. And you are too. So take it from me. Consistency is your co-pilot, not mindless grinding and hustling to get to your goals. And the best way to be consistent is to have a main goal that you can work towards every single day. Now, if your goal is, I want to get better at art, then that's a fine one to have. Like, absolutely fine. Everyone pretty much has that goal, right? The problem that I have with that goal is this word here. Because what does better look like? What does better mean? Also, your definition of better is going to change a lot as your skills improve. So I don't feel that this goal is specific enough or helpful enough. A better goal, in fact, in my opinion, the best goal to have is to finish your comic. If you make that your goal, the only two things you need to do is turn up and work on it. That is it. As long as you're observing, spotting your weaknesses, doing flaws to strengthen those weaknesses, and then moving on to the next page every time, you are on the right path. You are doing the right thing. And this not only means that you're going to be a better artist, but it will eliminate the stop-start nature of comic creation that so many of us go through. You're no longer going to feel that you need to study before you start your comic, or you need to stop your comic to study and then restart it again, because it's your comic that's going to inform the structure of your study in the first place. You basically can't get better unless you work on your comic. That's the kind of mindset you need to have. Remember, it's not the specific amount of time that you put in that counts, it's action that counts. It's you actively working on your comic and your studies, even if that is only 10 minutes, and improving 1% after every page is finished. And trust me, that adds up significantly over time. Time is just one of those things that cause us so much stress when it comes to completing our comic goals. I used to stress out so much that I didn't have enough, and I would spend so much mental energy trying to carve out time from my schedule that it actually impacted not just my relationships, but my art improvement as well. If you're not in a good headspace, then your art is going to suffer as well. And we all wish we had more time, no matter what our circumstances are. I think that's a universal want and desire for most of us. But there is a way to get more done in less time as a comic creator, and I will show you how in this video next.